Welcome to Sherlock Mondays. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we're going on a biblioventure through the stories of Sherlock Holmes. This is episode 16, The Adventure of the Copper Beeches. And joining me in just a moment is co-host Mary Alcaro. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Ed.
How are you?
I am recovering, but doing well.
I recently saw you in evening gown, uh,
Yes.
but more on that in a few moments. We'll chat a little bit about Baker Street Irregulars weekend in New York City.
Yeah.
But what you are here for on this episode is to help on Sherlock Mondays is to help deduce, decipher, dissect Arthur Conan Doyle's stories about the world's first consulting detective, Sherlock Holmes, and his able assistant, Dr. John Watson, in a kind of conversational annotation. If you are watching live right now, I ask you to please like and subscribe these videos and have fun in the live chat. If you're watching the recording, I also ask you to please like and subscribe this. Doing those kinds of things, raises our visibility among the, digital world. Sherlock Mondays is also an audio podcast. So if you're listening to the audio, thank you for listening. I know people do because they were telling me all weekend. Welcome to any new viewers who I may have encountered over the weekend who are tuning in for the first time. So I love this, Mary, because for the previous iterations of Biblioventures, they were complete novels. So if you
Right.
jumped in halfway through, you had to catch up in the reading unless you knew the book really well. But
Right.
here, one story, right? Give me
Yeah, it's great.
is you watch this video. So all right, everyone. Before we start, and because we have our mixologist on board, our Sherlockian mixologist on board, Mary Alcaro, what are we drinking, Mary?
Ed, we are drinking the Copper Peach, which is the not only the cocktail for this week's story, but the official cocktail of the Sons of the Copper Beeches, the Philadelphia Scion Society of the Baker Street Irregulars. So the Copper Peach is obviously a pun on the Copper Beach. 2 ounces of Southern Comfort, that's where your peach is coming from. An ounce of, we do Vigo Amaro because it's a local distillery in Philly. But you can easily swap in an Amaro of your choice, or Campari works really nicely. An ounce of sweet vermouth, and then we garnish with an orange twist.
Yeah, I haven't had my orange twist in there. I don't know.
Oh, very fancy.
No. I like this drink a lot. This is
Thank
really
you.
good.
Thank you. This was
But you made a
actually my
second drink.
I did make a second drink. This is so everyone who comes to the Scion dinners doesn't always no, isn't necessarily always a drinker. So we do have the official virgin option for the evening, which is delightfully called the Smack Smack Smack. And this is a sort of glorified, I think, like cherry Coke kind of situation. It's Diet Coke with about a half ounce of a grenadine, or if you don't like it as sweet, maraschino liqueur, a few dashes of bitters, and 3 maraschino cherries that have been squashed
Mash them.
to represent the smack, smack, smacking of the cockroaches in the story.
I was going to smash them and then put them in this just so I could combine them, but I didn't get to it.
I
But
usually put them on a toothpick when I do that because otherwise they just look so sad in there.
well, this is a great drink, and I remember I had it for the first time when we did the virtual meeting for the Copper. Was that when you would come
Yeah.
up with it, or was it before that?
Absolutely. No, that was so that fun fact is that this was my first this actually the first original cocktail I created after bartending school. And it was the first Sherlockian cocktail that I invented. So it was well before you had even approached me to do Sherlock Mondays. And we made it for our virtual Sons of the Copper Beeches meeting when we were all in lockdown and wanted to find a way to kind of feel like we were all together and sort of imitate or bring back that like camaraderie of us together, alive and drinking in Philadelphia, which is the sort of motto of the Sons of the Copper Beeches. So we figured if we could all be drinking one or two of the same beverages, it would bring us a little closer across the virtual distance.
I've been doing that for 4 years on these shows
I
now.
know. Oh, you know what they say about
Drinking
great
with
minds,
people,
Ed.
drinking with people while talking about books.
Great.
Um, so, and everyone, Mary and I are members of the Sons of the Copper Beeches,
Yes.
as are all of our actually co-hosts. So you don't have to be from Philadelphia or live in Philadelphia to be a member of this Scion Society. Like all of the Scion Societies for the Baker Street Irregulars, they're all very welcoming. And we're always open to new people. If you're ever interested in joining or coming to a meeting, you can always send me an email and I will, we'll figure it out. We're kind of limited in the sense that we only have so many people we can invite for the two dinners that we have. Like the room
Right.
fills and everybody wants to come.
It does. Everyone was telling me all weekend how much fun they have at our meetings, our
Yeah.
Copper Beaches meetings, which is really, really flattering because there are so many great science societies. Yeah, we are unfortunately limited by the space that we use in the Racket Club of Philadelphia. So we always have more folks that want to come than we can actually accommodate. So, if you write to us and you don't get your first invite right away, don't feel bad. There's a bit of a waiting list. We're getting a little bit popular, but we will absolutely be happy to have you and welcome you if you are in the Philly area, whether you
I'll
live there
tease,
or not.
I'll tease too. There will be other options to do Sherlockian things come fall that I'm organizing as well. So, people
You
can't make
heard
it
it
to
here.
dinners or we can't fit more. There will be some
Yeah.
other things in the works. Um,
He said, foreshadowing things to come.
Yes, but we just mentioned talking to people. That was at the 2024 BSI weekend, which happens either the first or second weekend every January
Right.
when investitured members of the Baker Street Irregulars, like Mary and all the other co-hosts, Monica and Anastasia and Curtis, not me yet, one day we hope,
One day.
get together and have a dinner. But then in addition to that dinner, there's all kinds of other events. There's other lunches from Ash for the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes to the Spo dinner, which I got to go to this year. Uh,
That is the ticket you want to get. I
yeah,
missed out on that this year.
yeah. The Spo to everyone is in the Dying Detective of one of the later Holmes stories. He's in a delirious fever, and he says in bed, "Shall the world then be overrun by oysters?"
As you do.
Yes. And so SPODE was created. It's the Society for the Prevention of Oysters Destroying the Earth. And we meet and we eat oysters and other sea creatures. But it's a special one in New York because it's at the Grand Central Oyster Bar, which is really great to have them at. And I got to do the SPODE dinner this year, and I was
So fun.
really excited. Um, but that's where I saw you in evening gown because for the
Yes,
BSI dinner, you guys really dress up, don't you?
we do. A lot of us use it as an excuse to go black tie. Although Stephen Rothman always reminds me, Stephen always tells me, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. Stephen always tells me, I'm not going to bother with a tuxedo because this started as a dinner club that gentlemen went to after work. I am wearing a sport coat. So the whole gamut is run. I like to use it as an excuse it's like my Met Gala, once a year. I don't even go as hard as Monica does. Monica always looks absolutely stunning at these events.
I mean, even a couple of the other things people were dressing up for, and I just have which tweed suit am I wearing? So is my October through March clothes or I have four tweed suits and I just wear them. So
It's very period appropriate.
it
Um,
is. It works, especially works for these gatherings.
yeah, and of course our little accents that Monica Schmidt is responsible for reviving. These are the official colors of the Baker Street Irregulars. They represent the three dressing gowns that Holmes has mentioned, colors of the three dressing gowns that Holmes is said to wear throughout the stories. So that's how we got these. But Monica really has gone above and beyond in recent years with the merchandising for the BSI with
Yes.
scarves, and this is actually a little pocket square, silk scarves. Now some winter scarves with our investitures on them. Very cool stuff.
And let me tell people too, you don't have to be some kind of official Sherlockian or even in a Scion Society to go and join.
Not at
People
all.
do that. I mean, there are people who just come, and it was from all over the world. People were there.
Yes.
Mostly America, but we had a few people visiting from other countries, and
Yeah.
these Sherlockians are the most welcoming group, that you can, find as far as, fans go. You don't get the snooty, kind of attitudes that, oh, like you don't know this as well as I do, or who are you to
Oh,
join this kind of thing.
no.
People are so welcome. It was my first time doing the weekend. I live so close too in Philadelphia, but I never make it up. Steve Rothman, one of the other people who used to edit the Baker Street, he's been asking me to go for years. Other people have asked me to go, and I just, I never make the time. And this year was clearly perfect.
Yeah.
So I made it up, and it was so great to meet new people, meet a lot of people who watch this show,
Yeah.
which was really nice.
I had two different people that I introduced myself to recognize me this weekend and say, "Oh, I watch you on Mondays with Sherlock," and I was like,
Good.
"Oh, Sherlock Mondays," and I was like, "Oh,
Good.
well,
Yeah, I had
sounds like
that
it's a
too. I
thing."
had people coming up and said, and what was nice is that I had long time Sherlockians who I really respect and know this canon inside out,
Hmm.
how much they love the show we're watching and are hopefully watching now. And that's really nice to know that they also, because we have to show we're for people who've never read it, and we're for
Yeah.
people who have always read them. So we need to do something for everyone on this, and it's been working. I got to spend a good bit of time with Max McGee. Hi, Max, and PJ Sullivan, and the newly investitured Rudy Altergott, which was really
Oh,
great. First
great.
time I met Rudy.
Oh,
Um,
Rude
I
is wonderful.
I love meeting Madeline Quinones, who
Yes.
does her own little irregular podcast, and she's wonderful. First time I got to meet her, so many people. I mean, a real treat to meet all. I mean, I was so happy when people would come up to me and say they watched the show and all of that. And what a great weekend it was. And you know how I finished it coming home
How?
last week on Barrel Coronet. Holmes dresses up in his costume and he goes out and he puts two pieces of bread and a piece of meat and he puts it in his
Yes.
I had a pocket sandwich on the way home. My daughter made me a sandwich and I put it in my pocket and came
Very Sherlockian of you.
pocket sandwich. Well, it was a lot of fun. I recommend everybody, if there's not a Sherlockian group near where you live, you can always start one. Just
Hmm.
one other person will be all it takes.
Yeah.
And if you're in this area, in the Philadelphia area, I recommend you to get in touch with me, and I'll let you know what's going to happen in the fall. So, all righty. We should probably talk about our story tonight.
Yes, we should.
The Copper Beeches, our story for our Scion Society too, which is really great. The if you we've shared a PDF facsimile of the Adventure of Copper Beeches as it was originally published in June 1892 in the Strand Magazine. You can download that on the Rosenbach's Sherlock Mondays page. I always send out a link with that too every week. If you register for this, if you're newly watching, you can register for Sherlock Mondays, and once a week you get the drink recipes and a direct link for the show, and also the link for the PDF facsimile. So June 1892. What's interesting, Mary, is that for the Copper Beeches, Doyle's own mother contributed to this story. Do you know this
I
story?
don't know this.
She actually gave him the idea for um, the girl cutting her hair off to impersonate someone, and Doyle used it. And it's in a couple letters. Doyle was also unhappy with doing Sherlock, even by this point. Like he'd wanted to write his historical novels, and he has to write
Mm,
these detective tales. But Doyle writes to his mother in November 1891. I have done 5 of the Sherlock Holmes stories of the new series. This is the second half of that first
mhm.
bunch, the first 12 that he put together. Blue Carbuncle, Speckled Band, Noble Bachelor, Engineer's Thumb, Barrel Coronet. And he said, I think they are up to standard of the first series, and the 12 ought to make a rather good book of the sort, which will happen. And he says, I think of slaying Holmes, the 6th, and winding him up for good and all. He takes my mind from better things. And then I think your golden-haired idea has the making of a tale in it, but I think it would be better not as a detective tale, but as a separate one. And then he changes his mind and
Mm-hmm.
does make it into part of a detective tale. And this is in January 1892. He says, writes to his mother again. Basically, the life and letters are almost it's like Doyle's letters to his mother.
Right.
So I don't know what percentage, but most of these letters are to
Well,
his
she's an amazing woman. I was
yeah.
just saying to Steve Rothman, I'm like, has anyone done a biography of the mum,
Ooh, I wonder.
Doyle's mother? Because she is really just a remarkable, very interesting and strong presence in his life. And the letters, I think, are a great reflection of that. And here,
Yeah.
as you said, you see a bit of her brain at work, inspiring this story.
Although it makes a rather incomplete picture of a person in that what you're going to write to your mother isn't the same as you're going to write to other people. Not that you would hold back, but it's going to be different no matter what. And so we
Exactly.
don't get a lot of that other stuff in these
Yeah.
letters, which I would like to see. But then this in the second letter, he writes, during the holidays, I finished my last Sherlock Holmes tale, The Adventure of the Copper Beeches, in which I used your lock of hair. So now a long farewell to Sherlock. He still lives, however, thanks to your entreaties. So his mother has asked him not to kill Sherlock, and he didn't yet.
Yes.
He has kept him alive for this
That's
story.
the power of the mom. She's pretty amazing.
So her idea, she told him that literally, like it was about, she said, well, actually, she said it would be about a girl who was kidnapped,
Mm,
then has her hair cut, her golden hair cut off to impersonate someone else.
mm.
It's funny because authors usually, when you tell them, like, hey, here's an idea, they're like, yeah, I don't
I'm
need
like,
your
no, stop it. Yeah, exactly.
they have enough ideas. But
Yes.
the mother told him an idea and he used it,
Of
which I
course.
really like.
That's great. That's so cool. And I didn't realize that, so thank you.
I also discovered another thing that Doyle had a dog named Carlo.
Yes.
Well, it was actually his daughter's dog, I think. It was like a family
A
dog.
family dog. Yeah, Carlo.
His daughter Jean had a dog, and they named that
Yep.
Carlo, which was nice.
Yep.
And he wrote a poem. Do you know the poem?
I don't know the poem.
He wrote a poem when Carlo died
Oh.
in July 1921. So long, this is like 30 years after this story.
Oh.
But the poem is, no truer, kinder soul was ever sped than thine. You lived without a growl, you died without a whine.
Bless. It's so sweet.
um, not the Carlo of this story. So,
No, very much not. Very much not the
uh,
Carlo of this story.
well, when we get to the end, I'll have to at least do the first couple lines, maybe. I don't
Yeah.
not the
Poor Carlo.
same dog. This dog. Well, this
Well,
dog didn't
he was just
growl.
hungry. It's not his fault.
Yes, yes, yes. It's absolutely true. So we will definitely get to that. Um, yeah, let's start this. Let's do this.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories, and one of a lot of people's favorite stories because
Hmm.
it's so good. This is
It
really a
is.
tremendously well-written story for any author. And the way he's kind of created this move, done a story of Sherlock Holmes, the detective, but the story itself is also very interesting. And there's all these other little details, and it's also like there's so much Jane Eyre in this story, which is
There's so much Jane Eyre in this story, which is another reason I'm thrilled to be on this week because I love Jane Eyre.
good.
Jane Eyre's
If I
one of my
miss
favorite
any Jane
novels.
Eyre bits, let me know.
I'll just jump in with Jane Eyre. You will
Well,
regret.
and then it opens talking about art, the
Yes.
value of aestheticism, it seems.
Yes. A little
Um,
bit of Jane on the brain here.
to the
Yes.
man who loves art for its own sake, remarked Holmes, it is frequently in its least important and lowliest manifestations that the keenest pleasure is to be derived. Um, that and then about Watson and how he likes to embellish his stories and give prominence to too much of the sensation. Uh,
Yep. Yep.
but but
It's a
at the
great domestic opening.
it is at the end of it, I think what he's saying is what I get from this is those who love art for its own sake, art for its
Hmm.
own sake, which is a thing in the air at the time,
Yeah.
um, find the most pleasure in the unimportant case.
Hmm.
Um, and Watson, according to Holmes, understands this because many of his stories have been about the trivial cases which Holmes can use his deductive power to solve.
Right. The things that are not necessarily crimes, the things where either no obvious crime has been committed,
Yeah,
or something seemingly very trifling turns
yeah,
out to be something that's of vast importance. We think of, right, the Redheaded League. It starts off very, very early, where something that seems like a practical joke or something of no consequence at all turns out to be a potential bank heist that could cost the British Crown quite a sum of money.
and
And
dangerous people that
oh,
gotta
yeah.
clap the gun to him like don't move.
That's a great
So
one. Waiting in the dark, stake out in the dark. No, it's so good. Um, yeah, Watson does grasp that. This is a great opening in terms of just the little like domestic back and forth between the two of them,
yeah,
right? That he seems like he's paying Watson a compliment, and it is a very backhanded compliment. And Watson, of course, gets a little defensive. It seems to me that I have done you full justice in the matter, I remarked with some coldness, for I was repelled by the egotism which I had more than once observed to be a strong factor in my friend's singular character. And Holmes, as if to read his mind, was like, "Oh well, it's not ego. It's just that it's not conceit. It's that these should be about deductive reasoning,
logic.
for example,
That's what people should be
logic.
seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why people are coming to these stories." Holmes needs to chill with that. There's a reason that the varieties of tobacco ash are not, those treatises aren't selling the way that
Yeah.
Watson's cases are selling. So maybe he doesn't quite know what the people want. Um, Give
Well,
Watson some credit.
speaking of tobacco ash,
Yes,
we have a pipe here reference that I can't pass by either.
of course.
Taking up the glowing cinder with the tongs from the fire. We'll show this picture in a minute too. Which is never the way to light a pipe. But Holmes doesn't care about
No.
destroying this pipe. Um, he lit the long cherry wood pipe, which was wont to replace his clay when he
Hmm.
was in a disputatious rather than a meditative mood. Um, I find this fascinating
Hmm.
because I would think it would be the other way around. I would think that the clay wouldn't be, but the point is that that is Holmes's. But it makes sense to me that Holmes has when he smokes his clay pipe, that's meditative for him. He
Hmm.
can think better when he does it. And I have this I this happens to me too. Certain activities require certain pipes. There are pipes I don't read with. I'll
Mm.
do other things, watch things, or just sit while I'm working. And there are pipes that I like while I read. Um, this is my cherry church warden. It's a long cherry stem pipe. This is cherry wood here. It's really darkened here just from being held. It's pretty old. Um, and then there's a little bit of a cherry wood stem, and then the rest of the stem is just this kind of lucite, thing. But this and this was actually my wife's grandfather's pipe, Papa
Oh,
pipes. And I got a
wow.
bunch of his pipes, and so he smoked this, and I have it now. I
That's
smoked a real
lovely.
big cherry wood in episode 12. um, but they smoke really well. Cherry woods are great, great smokers. And so that's why I think like, why would that be disputatious? I mean, it's a really, it's a nice, it's a good strong smoke. You get, it
Yeah.
really works well when you're smoking. But for Holmes, it's disputatious.
Well,
So
and I love that Watson knows this. Watson
yes,
can tell by looking at the kind of pipe that his friend is smoking, like sort of what can he expect
yeah,
from Holmes's temperament for the day, which is again just a tremendous insight into their relationship, and also the things we don't the observations that perhaps we don't give Watson
yeah,
credit for.
yeah.
Perhaps he does observe.
The people who think that old fashioned symbol of the big calabash pipe with the meerschaum bowl in
Mhm.
it and real giant curved. I mean that's an image that comes up for Holmes later
Yeah.
from actors or whoever's using it. Although I have not, and maybe someone out there listening can or watching can let me know of this. I haven't been able to pinpoint exactly where it comes from. Everyone assumes it comes from William Gillette, who played
What? Yeah.
on stage, and it does not, because I've
Oh.
never seen a picture of Gillette with that pipe. I could be wrong. There could be pictures of Gillette with that pipe that I've never seen. It could be another actor who used that pipe, and then it just kind of, somehow it becomes the well-known pipe. The bent pipes that I see Gillette with are not that kind of calabash pipe. Um, so at some point, though, it gets associated with Holmes, but Holmes mentions this is the only mention of of a cherry wood pipe that he has.
Mm.
Um, and there's one mention of a briar pipe, and
Hmm.
that's in Man with the Twisted Lip,
Hmm.
sitting on the pillows and smoking. And then there's a few mention of clay pipes, but the rest
Hmm.
of the mentions are just in general pipes. So we don't really know exactly what pipes he was smoking outside of the oily clay,
Hmm.
the disputatious cherry
Cherry
wood,
wood.
and a couple briars. But most pipes are briars too, by the
Hmm.
way. So by now they are, and they were becoming that in his day. They had moved away from most pipes were clay because they were cheap to most pipes were starting to be briar by Holmes's day.
Ah, regardless, you're not really supposed to light them with the tongs.
Never light a pipe with a hot burning coal. So
For safety
would
reasons,
also
dear listener.
taste you would also really taste that as well. Um, this is the picture though, and I love Paget's um, picture of that. I usually share the pictures right from the PDF, but the PDF picture for this was really not as nice, as very detailed. It was really washed out. But here you can see him
Oh
lighting.
Lord.
You have to turn it to the side as he lit it. Um, but this is home. Look at his slippers here and his
Love
dress
it.
down. Still very, bohemian, relaxed, gentleman. But Watson's looking very, respectable middle class. Up.
Very proper, yes.
Yes.
With his eyes on that
Yeah, watching
spender
him
there.
light it. Well, it is. And it winds up being like mesmerizing for people when
Sure.
you're smoking, that they can't help but watch you do that, as I've
As
noticed.
you've learned.
All righty.
Oh.
Um, So yeah, they finish this conversation about the stories we've already talked about, and then we get this kind of scene setting at Baker Street
Hmm.
that I really like, using details that kind of become iconic for these stories.
Yes.
Cold. It was a cold morning in the early spring. Spring. We sat after breakfast. So this also means Watson's not married. He's still living there with Holmes.
Hmm.
They're before or after the first wife, if that ever happens, or Doyle
How
didn't
many wives
worry
did
about
no.
chronology. But here's the lines. A thick fog rolled down between the lines of dun-colored houses, and the opposing windows looked like dark, shapeless blurs through the heavy yellow wreaths. Our gas was lit, and Holmes then was, silent, looking at, reading the advertising columns of the papers. But those little images, that's the fog, the gaslight. This is all the Vincent Starrett's
Yeah.
column 221B.
Right. The scenes of Baker Street that we come to really associate with the Holmes and Watson characters and with their world. This is one of the things that the Granada series does very well with
Yeah.
Jeremy Brett and Edward Hardwicke and before him David Burke.
Yeah.
Just the imitation of these scenes in setting these stories, even to the point because Jeremy Brett was such a huge
Yeah.
Sherlockian. That you can often see them recreating the poses in the Paget
Yeah.
illustrations, like in the beginnings of the episodes. It's absolutely it's really really fascinating.
And Brett
Uh,
would correct them sometimes in the
yes,
script about details and things and what Home would say or what's going to
yes,
happen here. He would correct them, say
yep.
not necessarily that it's not in the stories, but that it would be very inconsistent with what is in the stories and how things are.
Very well cast. Jeremy Brett is my personal favorite screen Holmes. And there's also that great photo of him like wandering around on set with his edition of the canon in his
Yeah.
hands. And it's actually the edition that was my first canon, some book club edition, that sort of red
Oh, yeah.
leather bound. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That I stole from my father. I hope he doesn't watch this episode. He still doesn't know
And
that.
Brett's were very detailed too,
Yeah.
about the smoking. He
Yes.
smokes cigarettes frequently in that series because Holmes does in the stories.
Yes, more than we think.
Bars, he'll smoke pipes. He really does the whole tobacco gamut.
Yeah, the cigarette smoking and I think the coffee drinking are the two
Yeah.
things that I think always surprise Sherlockians when you go back and you're like tallying instances of these things. Like we expect the pipe more, but Holmes does smoke a lot of cigarettes through the stories. And we always associate, like the Victorians with tea, sitting down for tea, but there's a lot of coffee drunk
Yeah.
in the canon because, it's crime to fight. You got to be up.
You can't just rely on cocaine all the time.
No, man cannot run on only Coke.
I've hit
Um,
32 references to coffee in the stories just in a quick
Yeah,
search.
that's
So, yeah.
fascinating. It's high, it's much higher than you'd expect.
Yeah.
But no, Holmes is in a grumpy mood despite our beautiful scene, and he's decided to make it Watson's problem. Um,
Well, he
as
mentions
he's
also
wont
the
to.
cases here, like
Yes.
Watson's, the cases you allude to are the cases without breaking the law, and it's
Hmm.
um the help of the King of Bohemia, Miss Mary Sutherland, Man with the Twisted Lip, The Noble Bachelor, um, with the exception of especially Case of Identity, which we talked about at the end of our episode on that.
Yes.
Uh, there probably were laws broken in that to deal with fraud and her and Mary Sutherland's father-in-law, but whether or not it was a breach of promise suit that she
Hmm.
could bring against them, that's not really breaking the law in a sense because that would be a civil case.
Right.
Ira Matesky wrote a piece in this autumn 23 issue of the Baker Street Journal, in which he went through some of the adventures and talked about the cases in them and the illegal, what was illegal and what wasn't. In Case of Identity, he points out, Ira, that there was probably a case to be had here for fraud, but the breach of promise, she would have had to file a suit. That's not
Mm,
really breaking the law. You just file a suit. And um, but even so, what we talked about at the end of the story is like none of that was ever going to happen. Like she was not going to sue her stepfather for anything or call the
right.
police on her stepfather for anything. So
Right.
that's
And
even
that's
worse for her than
Yeah,
getting.
yeah. She doesn't come out ahead in any situation like that. But, it just reminds us of the role that Holmes plays. And this is an argument that, I mean, I'm certainly not the first to make this argument. It's been made many, many times. But Holmes is the sort of maintainer of social order in Victorian society, that it's not just about obeying the law, certainly as we saw in the Blue Carbuncle, right? Where he may be breaking a law, but he may be saving a soul, he says. Where Holmes takes not just the law into his own hands, but the social mores of his society to try to return things to their appropriate kind of status quo, and that doesn't always involve crime.
Yeah.
It often involves matters of reputation, sort of delicate relationships between fathers and sons, and employers and their employees, and government officials who have close relationships with their bosses. Holmes is there to smooth a lot of this stuff over and to bring order to the empire.
Yeah.
And I often think of Holmes as sort of an agent of empire, keeping things safe for Victorian society, particularly at a time when England is at its height. But there's always these threats coming from abroad or from the lower social classes, or things that are threatening to upset the kind of greatness of
Hmm.
Britain. And so it's interesting to see Holmes recognizing this, of course, of himself in some capacity by mentioning that he tends to cases that are not just about crimes that have been committed. Although he worries that now he's become, what does he say, an agency for lost pencils.
Yeah. The great days of crime are past, man, or at least criminal man, has lost all enterprise and originality. And, yes, and now he has to answer all these letters about people, and he's just got one of those letters, apparently.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Dear Mr. Holmes, I am very anxious to consult you as to whether I should or should not accept the situation which has been offered to me as governess. I can imagine him just like, oh,
You're like,
what?
ugh. I'm not your dad. I don't care, you know? Yeah, I think what does he call it? He says, "This is my 0 point. This note I had this morning marks my 0 point I
Yeah.
fancy." Which just makes it, I think, all the funnier that, he sort of starts off with this preconceived notion that this is going to be a complete waste of his time, and probably that this girl is going to be really troubling. And of course we see that he has tremendous respect for Violet Hunter once he meets her.
Yeah. And Watson says right away, it may be of more interest than you think. You remember that affair of the blue carbuncle? All right, another story. That's like the fifth previous tale
I love it.
dropped here. Doyle loves dropping these into
He
the
does.
and part of it is this, read my other stories,
Yeah.
back issues of the Strand. But what it winds up doing for the reader, and I've mentioned this before, is that it creates this sense of deep history for these characters. There's all these other cases, there's all these other things they've been
Right.
through. So, and these are, in fact, the memoirs of Watson and
Hmm.
or at the time that he spent with Sherlock.
Right. And these are things that drive Sherlockian chronologists crazy.
Yes, because
In addition,
they
yeah,
never match up.
you can never square these circles, mostly because I'm not Holmes. Doyle just does not care. We care so much more. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful that Doyle didn't care, because it's certainly kept a lot of our little game alive, trying to make it make sense. But
Well,
yeah, drop in the blue carbuncle.
she comes in, Violet Hunter
Mhm.
comes in, and Watson, as usual, gives a
Keen
nice
eye for color.
detailed. But read his little description.
Oh, I love it. As he spoke, the door opened and a young lady entered the room. She was plainly but neatly dressed, with a bright, quick face, freckled like a plover's egg, and with the brisk manner of a woman who has had her own way to make in the world.
I love that description about
Great
her. So
description.
that's because it's not his usual, description of how alluring she is. We get a real description like, whoa, look at her. And this is a real description of her face. And
Yeah.
it's not metaphorical. Well, it is in a sense.
Well,
Well,
it is, but it's not romanticized in his
yes, right.
usual, right? That he talks about when he meets Mary Marsden, about like her sweet, like sort of angelic kind of nature, and Violet Hunter, he sees her freckles and all, and her affect really shines through, and he sees a sort of set determination in her. It's a lovely description of Violet Hunter, who turns out to be a remarkable client with an interesting story. Um, this is one of the things that annoys me about, even though I really, in general, like the Cumberbatch, the first two seasons of the Cumberbatch Sherlock series,
Hmm.
is that they very often represent Holmes as being sort of socially inept.
Oh yeah.
Um, and we've just heard Holmes bitching about not wanting to have to like advise this like girl who's coming to get advice for him, but he's never rude to her, and he's never rude to these
No,
clients.
no.
She comes in, and he's could not be nicer, right? Pray, take a seat, Miss Hunter. I shall be happy to do anything that I can to serve you. It's just
Story after story, we get Holmes understanding how to be sympathetic, empathetic with people,
yes,
to take care of them, and I love the BBC Sherlock,
yeah,
but it is a different Sherlock, and it's
it
and it's
is.
emphasizing that point about his character where he is
Yes.
very diffident and aloof and doesn't care about people when he's has his mind on this, but clearly in the stories you get so much more than that.
Yeah, it is, I think, one of the major divergences from the nature of the Holmes character, because we're even told, right? Watson even tells us he could see that Holmes was favorably impressed by the manner and speech of his new client.
Yeah. And he observes her, and well,
Yeah,
in his observing posture there, the lids drooping, fingertips together, and listening to.
always.
But they can tell that she's Holmes can tell he can read her character and tell
Yes.
that she's somebody who is able, and
Hmm.
and then she will go on to demonstrate that consistently throughout this story. Uh,
Right. So she tells us that she's been a governess for the
mhm.
last 5 years. She's had a really stable situation with a Colonel Spence Monroe, but now that he has moved his family to Halifax, is that where he is? Yeah,
Yeah.
Halifax in Nova Scotia. She's without situation and she's really worried that she's coming to the end of her savings, which made me really sad, right? He's been gone for 2 months and already she's gotten to the end of like her
That's you know,
savings.
there's no saving. I mean, we find
That's
out
it.
it's £4 a month isn't, what
Yeah.
that's it. So
Not very much to go on. So she goes to this governess agency, Bestaways, and I really love this like ornery character of Miss Stopper. Can you just picture this like very sour-faced woman? I don't know. I just picture she's like very sour-faced, like very dour, like tight bun, like just
uh-huh.
like a irritate, very easily irritated, and they have the little gong that they ring to like have people come in and out of the room. Like
I
I
love the
love her.
gong.
I love it. I love the description of her. She's so like delightfully like sour lemon mouth kind of person. Um, so she goes to the agency. She's trying to find a new situation for herself when she meets, how does she describe him? A
Hey,
prodigiously stout man with a very smiling face and a great heavy chin which rolled down in fold upon fold over his throat.
and then
And
she says a little bit later that he is such a comfortable looking man that it was quite a pleasure to look at him. Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. The appeal of a jolly fat man is not really, there's no appeal anymore.
that's not what it used to be.
It's not like, of course, you can get the Santa thing, and
Yeah.
that's really great. But outside of that, that was a 19th century thing.
Yeah,
That
I can't remember the last time I waxed lyrical about a man's multiple chins.
yes, but it was, this is the 19th century. That meant
Right.
I'm prosperous and
Yes.
perhaps jolly.
Yes.
Well, he is certainly. At least this is how he behaves.
hmm And
And
sees her and immediately is taken with her.
he's like, you're hired.
Yeah. Yeah, and not for the reasons that Holmes and Watson. This is another thing I think that is great, right? We get these contrasting scenes. We don't give Doyle the credit for the kind of writing that he's doing here, right? He's given us Holmes and Watson seeing Violet Hunter for the first time, sizing her up and really like appreciating her character,
Yeah.
the way she carries herself, her comportment, her own powers of observation and attention to detail. And then you've got her future employer who will just kind of like looks at her completely surface level and was like, yeah, I'll take her. It's just about the way she looks.
Yeah. That's all he needs because,
That's
well,
all
we
he
know his
needs.
motives because he needs someone to impersonate the daughter. So this is, where
Yes.
what he's looking for. Um,
But oh man, how creepy and scary must that be for her before she knows what this is about?
well, he says, he's willing to give her, £100 a year, and for her 4 months, so she was making before £48 a year, so he's
Right.
doubling her salary.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of that's pretty close to the average salary for a governess
hmm
at this time. That's what they made.
Mm.
I mean, they also had their room and board covered, so
Right.
the family, and usually clothing too, or if they needed new clothing or that kind of thing, that would have been covered. Care of their clothing, that kind of stuff. But the governesses there's they can't save any money for the future, so like
No.
Violet, when she gets out of a job, and it wouldn't be unusual for someone to say, yeah, I don't need you anymore.
Right.
They could write her a letter of recommendation, but that's all she's got to go with. They're not going to
Right.
find her another job. And it's still an extraordinarily difficult position for a woman in the
Yes.
workforce
Yes.
to find other respectable jobs that she could get. So she's kind of stuck. We've had this in Jane Eyre,
Jane Eyre. Yes, exactly. When
and
she runs away from Thornfield, right? She's quite literally homeless. She's got
yeah,
nowhere to go because she has to get herself out of that situation so quickly. She's completely at the mercy of strangers, and things could have ended very, very badly for her.
but she finds this suspicious, as she
Yeah,
should. This is a
as she
red
should.
flag right
Yeah,
away. That like you're willing to pay me how much to just to do this?
yeah.
Suspicious. And then he tells her about the job, and he's
hmm
it's the Copper Beeches. That's the name of the home. It's a
hmm
rural place. One child, one dear little romper, just 6 years old, Oh, if you could see him killing cockroaches with a slipper, smack, smack, smack. Oh, three gone before you could wink. He leaned back in his chair and laughed his eyes into his head again. Yeah, and I've got a child who will one day be a serial killer.
Definitely, definitely. Starting small, killing roaches at age 6. He'll be killing dogs and cats in his
Well, we
basement
find out
before we
later
know it.
from her. He also kills mice and birds, anything he can
Yeah,
catch. Um,
absolutely.
we'll
So,
get into
yeah.
that. We'll get into that later. Of course, Paget does not illustrate the child, or especially killing cockroaches. There is one at a French a version published by Félix Juvin. There's an illustration by Gaston Simo de Fonseca, and
You're just showing off now.
I will share this picture. Oh, there it is. So glorious. In 1909, this was published. This
Oh
is
my
a little bit
God.
later, one of the complete editions, but there he is smacking his cockroaches. So
What an evil little child. I'm getting Chucky vibes from this.
he does have that look about him too.
Doesn't he?
Right? Yeah. And his little sailor suit here. I don't know what this is he's holding to smack him with. Some
I
kind of
guess it's
or
some kind
something.
of shoe or like slipper.
Can't
It's a
tell.
slipper. It must be a slipper, right?
His dad's slipper. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there he is. There's one dead already.
Oh no.
This is four. He can do four.
You could do 4. You could stop me from taking out 2 at once.
Maybe one got away. I don't know. Um, but clearly this isn't, promising for Violet that this will be the child. And then he kind of leads up to these other things, right? Oh, and of course you'll obey any little commands, and he gradually leads up to concessions she'll have to make,
Right.
which ends with, oh, and you'll wear any dress, and then of course you wouldn't mind if we asked you to cut your hair short.
Right.
I imagine there's
That
like a thought, like a moment there.
yeah. Yeah. Violet will do anything for love, but she won't do that. She's willing to do the wear the things they want her to wear, to sit where they tell her to sit, to deal with this cockroach killing kid. But her hair is very dear to
I
her.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I get like back in the day, I was the long haired, curly long haired dude, and I was, like I wouldn't have cut
yeah.
anything until I decided to cut my hair.
Well, but imagine someone asking you to have to shave for work, Ed.
Yes, that would have been like, yeah, it would be. But she says my hair is somewhat luxuriant and of a rather peculiar tint of chestnut. It has been considered artistic. Um, that's an interesting use of that word. Very
Yeah.
unusual use of that word as an adjective. I mean, I think we can see what it means, she means that it's kind of beautiful, like something you
Hmm.
would see in art, or maybe
Yes.
something an artist would be interested in portraying. I
Hmm.
get that, but the OED doesn't recognize that
No.
definition. And so I don't know if Doyle's playing with the language on his own
Hmm.
or people using it that way then that were not recorded, or that the OED has never come up with as being recorded. So, of
Yeah,
course, I
that
could
would.
send this to them.
I
So,
think you should. It's always interesting to go down the OED kind of rabbit hole. That's always where I run in my research. And yeah, it's great to see these sort of colloquial usages that don't make it into the OED attestations.
and then Rucastle's watching her. He had been watching me eagerly out of his small eyes, like he wants to see how she's going to react to this.
Hmm.
And so she won't do it. So he's like, okay, well, we'll have to get somebody else. Um,
And this pisses Miss Stopper off. I love her response to her. She's like, Do you desire your name to be kept on the books? She asked. If you please, Miss Stopper. Well, really, it seems rather useless since you refuse the most excellent offers in this fashion, she says sharply. You can hardly expect us to exert ourselves to find another such opening for you. Good day to you, Miss Hunter. And then she strikes the gong.
she struck a gong upon the table. And that would be great. I mean, to be able to have that as your goodbye, your final, like get out, like you have a
What a
gong.
mic drop.
What,
Yeah.
our meeting has
Tell some
ended.
off in your office, right?
So, I mean, she has a bit of a point. Clearly, it's like this is an age like, and he's offered her double. I mean, this is like the dream client is who
Yeah,
this is because she's getting a percentage. She's getting some kind of fee for this, and now she's not going to get it, and
right.
or hopefully she'll get it with somebody else. Um, but all right. Let me take this moment here to thank everyone. Thank all of you for watching this episode. As a nonprofit organization, the Rosenbach Museum and Library depends on the generosity of friends and supporters like you to keep programs like this free and accessible to hundreds of fellow Sherlockians worldwide, many of whom I met this weekend at the BSI weekend. I hope you will consider supporting the Rosenbach and Sherlock Mondays by donation, which you do so at our website. And really, it is a very true thing that any amount is great. Like if any small amount that you wanted to donate works. It all helps us do this. You could also become a member. Membership gives you free museum admission, discounts on programs and courses, exclusive invitations to member-only events. You can learn more about how to be a member on our website. And we've now, since we started doing these biblioventures, we have members from all over the world, which is really nice. We have some courses coming up. I am teaching another Dracula course that will start at the end of this month, and it's online, so you can join that. There is a Ulysses course that is a weekly Ulysses course, and what a great way to read Ulysses. It'll be 18 weeks, and it ends just before Bloomsday this year, when we have a big Bloomsday, celebration of Ulysses. People that take that course can also read at Bloomsday. So there's a little bonus there. And it's set up so, excuse me, because it's 18 weeks, clearly there'll be some weeks you'll miss. You're going to make every Thursday night, but there's little lectures recorded about all the chapters that you watch on your own anyway. And you can also watch the recordings of the class discussions that happen on your own time if you so choose. So there's also a Robert Burns course. There's a Virginia Woolf course. There's lots of other great programs in person as well as online coming up. So check us out online, and I'd love to see you at some other Rosenbach endeavors. Let's get back to this story. We had one question earlier that I didn't hit, and it was probably right after I mentioned Doyle writing the poem to his dog. Adam asked, did he write much any poetry, like serious poetry? He did. He liked writing poetry. He wrote poetry a lot. It's about as good as that Carlo poem. I have not personally found much to admire in his poetry.
It's not his strength.
But yeah, it tends to be very rhymed,
Right.
kind of, very strictly, and yeah, he doesn't seem to it's very cliche ridden. It wasn't his form. It wasn't the form that he could do exceptionally well. Like playwriting wasn't the thing he could do exceptionally well either. He's great with historical novels. He's great with short stories. I mean, it's all the fiction besides the Sherlock tales too. They're tremendous. He is easily one of the greatest, short fiction writers in the English language. But poetry wasn't it.
Not his thing.
That said, I will look for some that I think are especially good, and I'll start putting them online on our Facebook group, maybe.
That'll be fun to revisit.
Yeah, might be
Speaking of
might be a long wait. Find some
yeah, might be a long wait. Speaking of revisiting, though, Violet Hunter is revisiting her decision, thinking maybe she was a little hasty.
What Rucastle has sent her a letter, right?
Yeah.
Now he's like another, 30 pounds a quarter, 120 a year. So he knows I've got to up the amount.
Right. And says he's going to, that's the compensation for the inconvenience of what he calls their little fads, right?
And we get more details that it will be a dress that is a particular shade of electric blue we'd like you to wear. That won't be a big deal, will it? That you have to ask is just a little weird, dude.
A little weird. Why do you say my employer want me to wear this dress?
And we have one that used to belong to his daughter Alice out in
Philadelphia. And this is literally the reason why the Copper Beeches is the Science Society for Philadelphia, because this is the one time that Philly is mentioned in the Holmes canon. And it's nice to get a little shout out to an American city.
And his name this is the first time we learned his name, Jeffro Rucastle. Yes. Jeffro is a
Yeah.
really odd name.
Yeah.
I was trying to find other. I only found a couple instances of it just doing like Google book searches in the 19th century. I don't think this was a common, like one of those common names that now
Right.
isn't. It wasn't at all. But
Mm,
Doyle uses it twice in like around the same time. At the time he's writing Copper Beeches, he also wrote the story Lot 249, which is
yes.
Mommy Story, which was just dramatized for the Ghost Story for Christmas for the BBC by Mark Gatiss, and it's fantastic.
Very well done. Really
Um,
interesting interpretation. Very well done.
but there's a character in the story named Jeffro.
Mm.
I can't remember his last name, but I don't think if he makes it into the Lot 249, he's kind of changed a bit. So, or he's in another scene.
Mhm.
He's actually in the initial conversation with him, and Doyle changes that to have the initial conversation with another character.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Moffat changes guy or
But Jeffro
status.
is, but suddenly Doyle came out with the name Jeffro. He's like, yeah, I want to use that. And he uses it twice. So
Oh my God, how odd. I wonder if he met someone. I wonder if he met a
must have
Jeffro.
met met somebody named Jeffro as a writing, wrote it down. Jeffro. I don't remember that one.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I'm gonna have to let the cat out or she's gonna continue to make noise at us.
okay.
Shelly, Shelly cat, it's not all about you, my love.
Of course it is.
Go ahead. Go ahead, baby girl. Go ahead. Thank you.
Well, in the letter, it's not your house, it's the cat's.
I just live here.
Yes. And now she tells Holmes she's going to take the job. She says, I
Yeah.
will accept it.
Right,
And
which is funny, right? Because she said she's coming to him to wondering if she should take the job. But by the end of her telling her story, she says, "I am convinced. I'm going to take it. My mind's made up." But
yeah, he says, well, if your mind's made up. And she's like,
yeah,
well, would you not advise me to refuse? Like she wants somebody to say, don't do it.
right. And Holmes is such an interesting response to this, right? I confess that it's not a situation which I should like to see a sister of mine apply for.
Yeah. So there's
Right.
something fishy, but that's all he'll go. He's not going to
That's
say
all I'll
no.
go, right? Because he doesn't have the data, right? He's like, I don't have the data. Um,
Have no data. I cannot tell. So,
hmm hmm
um,
He says it seems too good to be true. It doesn't seem to be a nice household for a young lady.
but she says
Uh,
the money.
money. Yeah. Yeah.
And and then he also notices that the pay is good, too good. So this is, this is a concern you should have about this. Um,
Definitely.
and
Very validating. Your instincts are correct. Like something is fishy about this. This doesn't seem good. But, if you find yourself in doubt or if you see any danger, and she stops him, right? Danger? What danger do you foresee? And I love his response. It would cease to be a danger if we could define it. Thanks, Holmes.
he also calls it, I thought here, does he call it a novel situation? Or is that later?
What does he call him? That might be later. Let's see. Oh, yeah, no, you're right. There's something distinctly novel about some of the features of the
Yeah,
problem.
I love that because it almost sounded um, like I know he means new,
Yeah,
that's what he means,
yeah, yeah.
original. But I can't help thinking it's some kind of meta reference to like this is the kind of thing you'd encounter in a novel,
Ah,
especially Jane Eyre. But it's he says danger. He's there's we don't know,
right. Send me a telegram.
and then she responds very practically too. Okay,
Mhm,
that's enough. That she's if Holmes will help her, if she
mhm.
doesn't, then she doesn't have to worry. That like if she sends a telegram, if she can send a telegram and he'll come, she's like, okay, then I'm fine.
Right. And we should mention here, because I don't know if we commented on this earlier, that like the reason she's come to him is because she doesn't have anybody.
Yeah,
She's got no like brother of her own to ask. She doesn't have parents. She doesn't have living relations that can give her advice or be at her back if something were to happen to her. And I think it's very smart of a young woman who's alone in the world, wants someone to know that she's going into kind of
Yeah.
a weird employment situation. She's leaving London. That also concerns Holmes. We'll see later. And she just wants to know that there's somebody that like kind of knows where she
Yeah.
is, and that she can reach out to if things go wrong. I couldn't help but think of I have a good friend who every time she goes on a blind date, texts me and says, "Hey, I'm going out on a blind date tonight with this guy. This is the guy's name. This is where we're meeting, just in case you don't hear from me or hey, if you need to tell the police where I am." Like it's morbid and it's horrible, but like this is the world we live in, right? And it just made me think of that here's poor Violet alone in the
Well,
world.
it's realistic because she's not the helpless fainting gothic heroine.
Right.
She's more like Jane Eyre, who
Yes, she
is
is.
strong, determined, making decisions, but
Yeah.
also
And also alone in the world.
recognizing, realistic limitations of your world in which
Yes.
if you're in a situation, you might need someone's help,
Yes.
and specifically a male's help in this world.
Hmm.
Um, and she knows that Holmes has her back.
Yeah. Smart of her to secure that in advance, even though
Yeah.
she's decided to go.
Um, she is going to she says, I will sacrifice my poor hair tonight.
Poor
Like,
thing.
yeah, like some folk ritual is going to go on.
Well, I know she holds on to it. We'll
Yeah.
get there, but like she holds on
No,
to it. She's quite attached to it.
I have the hair from the first time I chopped it off.
No, you don't. Do you really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was going to give it to like one of those things and I never got
Right.
around to it. It just sat there. So I just still have it. So I think I
Have
might
very
have it for when it happened twice in my life, actually.
God.
Because
It's
I've
very
grown my hair like that in the
Victorian.
middle of my back a couple times and then it was since cut. So, and then now that I'm going bald, I figured I'll just do the hair here instead of there. So,
Well, it's all very Victorian of you. You can make it into jewelry for your daughters.
yes. So it exists. It is
Yeah.
there. Well, Watson wonders, and
Mm.
I love what Watson says here because it sounds like the copy on the back of a Gothic romance. What
Hmm.
strange side alley of human experience this lonely woman had strayed into.
Dun, dun,
That
dun.
is
It's so good.
exactly a quote from the back of a Gothic romance
It's
novel.
so good.
Um, and Holmes is just like, data, data, data. So he needs, I can't make bricks without clay.
Oh,
Another
that's such a famous
great
little Holmes
line
quote, right?
for Holmes that he's, he wishes he could do this. Well, she finally sends a telegram,
Yep.
which does not, which I think delights Holmes, right?
Yep.
She's in trouble. Hooray. I get to
Oh,
help.
case something cool is
Um,
happening for once.
he
Yeah.
tells Watson to get the Bradshaw guide out right
Oh, I
away.
love that. I went on a whole rabbit hole,
Oh,
down a
did
whole
you?
rabbit hole about the Bradshaws, right? About the train timetable. Like
Hmm.
they're printed guides of the various train lines in London. They hadn't been consolidated yet into like the major, I think it's like what, three or four major lines for the English train system. And so, railroad time isn't like quite standardized yet. And so the Bradshaw guide becomes like the way that you keep up with what the train tables are when you can't go on like your what I do, my NJ Transit app.
Yeah.
Um,
And it comes out monthly. The Bradshaw
yes,
Railway guides are monthly, so you keep getting them. So you're
as
constantly
things get
what train
updated.
is
And
next.
I loved in my reading, they were like, yeah, it becomes sort of like a catch-all term. So eventually other companies put them out, but in the same way that like all tissues become Kleenex, it's like
Yeah,
any timetable is just a
is the
Bradshaw
Bradshaw.
to Victorians. Like look it up in your Bradshaw.
And it's a reminder too how, this is that time where
Hmm.
they're all connected. And we're going to get hints of this later in a little bit, just in a moment about the difference between the, areas of the country. But
Yeah,
previously, you're very separate. And then it's the 19th century when the railroads, dissect, just run all through England.
right.
People are connected and move about. And before the railroads, people never saw outside of, whatever county they
Oh
were.
yeah, because a horse and carriage can only take you so far and so long. It takes so long to travel. This, of course, is one of the other things that leads to the sort of explosion in popularity of horse racing in England.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I ended up writing several years ago for a BSI Press book. Oh gosh, Upon the Turf, I think is the name of the book.
Hmm.
And my contribution was, something very appropriate and ladylike. I think it was bookies, booze, and women, a day at the racetracks, and the way that the railroad system really not only helped like move horses to different races around different parts of the country, but allowed people to sort of travel from the city to the countryside and like spend a day at the track. And you could
We
move around and bet on various races.
we will see that in the next episode, Silver Blaze, when that exactly happens. That is, they thank you for giving me the heads up on that.
I try.
Um, they you succeed frequently. Uh,
Thank you.
it's nice that Watson Holmes also asks him to come with him. Will you come with
Yeah.
me? Asks
Yeah.
Holmes.
Well, after he tells him just look up the train, he's like,
Yeah.
hey, look this up for me. Oh,
He
will you
asks him
come?
to
You
come
want to
with him.
come? Yeah, will you come? Yeah, yeah, of course. I
But the
wish to.
telegram is brief. It's please be at the Black Swan Hotel at Winchester at midday tomorrow. Do come. I am at my wit's end. Hunter.
Hunter. I love the way she signs the
Yeah.
telegram.
What is this from a man? Why would a woman just sign her surname? Yeah, it's and it says something about her that she knows she can
Yeah.
write this, very just please be here at this time, you
Yep.
know, and come because I'm at my wit's end. I mean, she'll add that at the end there, but it's still very short to the point and just even her name. Like clearly she had to send it off quickly, but
Yeah, but still.
she understands that this is an important matter and I don't need to go into details or do any of that stuff.
No, or put the sort of courtesies that come in her
Yeah.
letter, right? Her previous letter has been, dear Mr. Holmes, I'm very anxious to consult you if I should or I shouldn't, like yours faithfully, in her full signature. And of course, like you said, the form requires something a little more
Holmes has
more
got to
terms.
think she is a great. She's this is a
She's
this is
so cool. She's so cool.
well, now we get to this great piece on the train here
Oh,
where first Watson says it's an ideal spring day and the clouds and the
the little
sunshine.
puff, the fleecy white clouds
And then he looks at
drifting
the little
down.
red and gray roofs of the farmsteadings. Are they not fresh and beautiful? And then read what Holmes says there. Do you know, Watson?
Holmes shook his head gravely. Do you know, Watson, he said, that it is one of the curses of a mind with a turn like mine that I must look at everything with reference to my own special subject. You look at these scattered houses and you are impressed by their beauty. I look at them, and the only thought which comes to me is a feeling of their isolation and of the impunity with which crime may be committed there.
He goes on the next one to say the lowest and vilest alleys in London do not present a more dreadful record of sin than does the smiling and beautiful countryside. Um, that Watson looks out and says, "Oh, look at these beautiful little homes out here in the
Yeah.
country." And Holmes says,
Oof. Yeah.
"Like, think of all the crime that goes unknown
Right.
in these areas."
That sounds like my childhood. I grew up in a police family, so
Oh yeah,
yeah, I did. My dad was a cop. So it's a very similar kind of it is a very similar, relatable kind of thought process of looking still, I feel like I look at situations and I'm like,
yeah. But for this is odd though, right? Because
yeah, no, it is.
usually it is the urban environment that is seen as the dangerous one.
Yes.
And but Doyle is doing this, like this kind of opinion really highlights Holmes's uniqueness,
Yeah.
and this is the way Holmes would think.
Right. But of course, I think he makes a great case for it. I think he's totally correct in
He
the
does.
explanation he
Go ahead,
gives.
read that.
He says the reason is very obvious. The pressure of public opinion can do in the town what the law cannot accomplish. There is no lane so vile that the scream of a tortured child or the thud of a drunkard's blow does not beget sympathy and indignation among the neighbors. And then the whole machinery of justice is ever so close that a word of complaint can set it going. And there's but a step between the crime and a dock. But look at these lonely houses, each in its own fields, filled for the most part with poor, ignorant folk who know little of the law. Think of the deeds of hellish cruelty, the hidden wickedness which may go on year in, year out in such places, and none the wiser.
Yeah, that well, you could say that same part especially that first part there about
Yeah,
what happens in the city now, and people do say that about urban environments. Like,
that's
yeah,
true.
people scream and nobody does anything about it, but this is also a view that's going on for. This is that kind of idea that inspires. I mean, this is a stretch, but this is a very different thing. Like Deliverance. This is that kind of idea that you when you move from regulated society, which
Hmm.
especially for Holmes and Watson is the urban environment in the city,
Yes.
out into the wilderness. They are. He says he says that they're ignorant, that
Hmm.
they don't know the law, and they're isolated. So who's going to stop them from doing things?
Right.
And that's the thing that also exists. That kind of mindset about civilization and how people behave when they're not. But it's weird because we also have this rural, pastoral,
Yeah.
ideal going on that this is a beautiful way to live. And it's Hobbiton, like hobbits aren't going to do this stuff, but Holmes would go to Hobbiton and the Shire to be like, oh, this is where it's going to be really awful.
Listen, you guys got a jewelry problem here. It's like,
So,
it's a huge, yeah. Although I do
uh,
feel this way living in a city. As a woman, I do feel safer in a city than I do in a more isolated kind of environment. Walking down
yeah.
a street where there aren't people for a similar reason that like just sort of the public pressure of people being around, even if you don't think that somebody's going to like swoop in and save you if something bad happens, like it's going to discourage people from being violent. One hopes.
Yeah. Well, when you're out in the countryside, don't go off the path.
No one can hear you scream.
Yeah. So, um,
Watson wants
they
to know if he knows what's going on, right? And he's like, I have seven separate
have
explanations. Such a
seven
pain in the
separate
ass.
explanations.
So
Um,
annoying. And he's not going to tell you what any
I'm
of
not
them
going to tell
are.
you any of them, but I'm going to tell you that, like, I figured it out.
Right.
One of these is going to be true. I just need, he needs data to test
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
figure out what it is. They go to the Black Swan, an inn of repute actually existed too. There was a Black Swan in the High Street
Yeah.
in Winchester.
So
So it's a
cool.
rare thing. I mean, he's usually inventing, places and names, but just like Dickens is always putting all the real inns in his stories.
I
That
love that.
this one actually existed.
I wonder if he met a Jeffro at the Black Swan,
Yeah,
pulled all this stuff from his experiences. But she's able to, she's not being kept under lock and key, right? And she says, like, to be fair to the Rucastles, like, they haven't technically done anything to me, but the vibes are off.
yeah.
The vibes are so off.
Well, first she also describes the house,
Yeah.
which is, um, which was the area is beautiful, but the house, it's a
Oh,
large square block of a house, whitewashed, but all stained and streaked with damp and bare weather and woods on three sides of it. So
so gothic.
we're getting this, Gothic setting here, the remote
Yeah.
house out in the countryside. Um, she says that Mrs. Rucastle, who she thought might have been a possibility before, she says Mrs. Rucastle is not mad.
Right.
Um, and that's also I didn't mention before, which is that's another Jane Eyre trope thing here that
Oh,
I think hint that we get here, the mad woman,
the
being
Mad Woman.
um that was her first thought before. It's like maybe the wife is mad and he needs to keep her there.
Right. And Holmes says, yeah, that's possible. Like I've thought of that as well. Um, because remember when she confronts him here, she says, like, there was no truth, Mr. Holmes, in the conjecture which seemed to us to be probable in your rooms at Baker Street. Like she had come up with that and said, I wonder if
Yeah.
the wife is mad. And he's like, I think that's a distinct possibility too. Which again, just more points for Violet Hunter being a good reasoner.
She also
Um,
has a reason that the Rucastle's first daughter had left is because
yeah,
his new wife is not she's not older than 30, and perhaps that she's closer in age to the
Alice, yeah.
daughter than so that might have been weird, and so she left. So we do know that too, that the wife is significantly younger than Rucastle.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that the new wife is closer in age to his daughter.
Yeah. And then she describes her behavior, Mrs.
Mhm.
Rucastle's behavior. She was a non-entity, passionately devoted both to her husband and her little son, noting every little want and forestalling it if possible. Um, clearly, I think for us, especially for modern readers, this
Yeah.
kind of behavior of someone who is abused,
Yes.
behavior of someone who is terrified
Yes.
of doing something wrong, or at least one who has been completely conditioned that this is how to behave
Yeah.
because this is what is expected of you.
That's what we call hypersensitivity,
Yeah.
right? Where she is very attuned to every little change and expression and want to try to sort of stave off future conflict. Yeah, definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
And her child's a
And
monster,
her
utterly
child
spoiled,
sucks.
spoiled and so ill-natured a little creature. He is small for his age, with a head which is quite disproportionately large. Alternate, he alternates between savage fits of passion and gloomy intervals of sulking. It's like Tonga is the child.
I was
Um,
going to say, imagine getting this on your
for
kid's report card.
And he has a remarkable talent in planning the capture of mice, little birds, and insects. So this kid is, you got to feel for this kid like you feel for Carlo, please.
Yeah, you're kind of
Because
hoping that Holmes, I think, is hoping he's going to be retired before
yeah,
this kid gets old enough to
we
make
will find
moves.
we will find out his name, and then I get bummed out because his name is Edward, right?
Right.
I don't mind when my name is like a villain like Edward Hyde. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Or like a romantic hero villain, like, Rochester is Edward Rochester. I'm like,
Edward Rochester, of course.
but I don't want to be little Eddie
You're like,
Rucastle
man,
murdering small creatures. I think don't use Eddie. Use Jeffro for that. Use
careful.
Jeffro Jr., okay?
You don't have an investiture yet. The BSI, be careful.
Please don't let it be.
Oh, I have no control, my friend. I have
Rucastle.
no control.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
the kid sucks and he's scary, and the situation is not
and they're
ideal.
and they're servants, right?
The servants are also unpleasant people
He's drunk, taller,
constantly.
rough, uncouth, a perpetual smell of drink, and then his wife is tall and strong with a sour face, silent as Mrs. Rucastle and less amiable. What I find fascinating here is they are both of them combined. They're Grace Poole in Jane Eyre.
Oh my God, you're
Strong,
right.
drunk,
Drunk.
and silent.
Yeah.
Doesn't like talk. Yeah, so that's Grace Poole. So
I didn't think that's
they're
brilliant.
guarding the door in a
Yes,
sense.
and they're guarding the hidden
Yeah.
woman in the attic. Um, yeah,
Well,
who's
here's the weird
supposedly
stuff.
not there.
What's that?
Who's supposedly not there.
Yes. And here's the weird that they give her the electric blue dress and she
Hmm.
wears it and he walks up and they sit her at the window with the back towards it and Rucastle tells funny jokes and she cracks up and this is like such a
I love
weird
that he's
situation.
actually funny though. Like it's funny
Yeah.
that like they don't ask her to play act at it. Like they don't have to bring her in on the con in any way because he actually just has this like endless supply of funny stories and he's genuinely just like hilarious. He is jolly,
They give her a yellowback novel to
of
read,
course.
everyone. Cheap
Watson's favorite.
sensational fiction. Yes.
Hmm.
Watson read a
Hmm.
yellowback novel in the Boscombe Valley Mystery. So
Hmm.
they don't even need a title. It's just a yellowback novel.
Whatever they got.
It is and now she starts to get suspicious. Like she starts to think like why can't I look out the window when I'm
Right.
in this room, right? And I love that
Right.
because this is the true Gothic heroine, right? Suspicious, curious.
Yeah.
This is what Gothic heroines do. They want to know what they need to solve a mystery. They're presented with a mystery and it's either portrayed in a Gothic novel as, well, woman, they don't, they're curious and they shouldn't be, that's a punishment, or they're very enabling, like say like, Anne Radcliffe's
Right.
or Jane Eyre, where it's like
Right.
that is a good and it's a good quality. You should want to know what's going
Definitely.
on.
Definitely. Especially if your employer's got you doing weird stuff.
So she figures out a way. She gets a little mirror. She looks
Oh,
in it,
she's
but
brilliant. It's
of
a
course,
great, great
Mrs.
plan.
Rucastle catches her because that's her
Yes.
job is to
Yeah.
oversee and make sure nothing goes wrong.
Yep.
And there's a man on the road. They make her wave him away. Uh,
Hmm.
she finds out about the dog Carlo, um,
Yeah.
who,
All these little ominous, again, very, very
yeah,
gothic, right? These very ominous statements by the her employer, the owner of the house, and says that they keep this beast sort of around on the estate so that no one can go creeping around at night. And he tells her to be careful.
They
Um,
feed him once a day and not too much then, so he was always keen as mustard. And then they let him loose every night. I mean, they basically abuse the dog, so
yes,
he'll be extra vicious.
yeah,
Um,
like
actually, and you wish it would turn on him. Like maybe someone would come up and give the dog some food, and the dog would be like, "Thank you,
I
please feed
know.
me."
Please feed the dog. Please let the dog go. Yeah, but
Now,
it's just another victim of this state.
I love the moment where she sees the dog out the window at night too. As it emerged into the moonshine, I saw what it was. It was a giant dog as large as a calf, tawny tinted with hanging jowl, black muzzle, and huge projecting bones. It walked slowly across the lawn and vanished into the shadow upon the other side. That dreadful silent sentinel sent a chill to my heart, which I do not think that any burglar could have done. Um, that he's like this specter wandering the grounds, right? In the
Yeah.
Gothic novel. I mean,
Doyle loves to write a creepy dog.
that will happen in The Hound. The
Yeah.
specter stalking the estate is what this
Yes,
is. Uh,
exactly.
it's also the
But
same thing that Speckled Band that
yes, the baboon, right?
and the leopard from
Yes.
Roylott, Grimsby Roylott has on his
Crimson
estate
Violet. Yeah.
to keep
Oh
people
God, I
away.
always know. I always think of that moment with Watson and Holmes in the dark, and they see the like misshapen creature, like biped walking
Yeah.
through, and they get that like squeeze of the hand, and then Watson, it's the baboon. But the really unpleasant, unnerving gothic horror of something's not right here, this beast prowling.
And now we get almost like a Bluebeard moment in here where she finds a coil of hair just like my own. Like, I'm not the first one, in a
Yeah,
sense, is what she's got to be thinking.
absolutely.
This
Yeah, well,
is,
first that initial fear, right, of like locked in this drawer, something's locked in her room, and that's creepy. And
and
then
I
she
have
opens it
to,
up, right, and it's the hair that she's like, but it's impossible because my hair's in the trunk. So that like very spooky, like what's going on
she
here?
compares them and it's someone else's hair.
Yikes!
Um, She is confident in her abilities. She says to Holmes, I am naturally observant, as you may have remarked, Mr. Holmes, and I soon had a pretty good plan of whole house in my head. Like she's figuring this out. This is, I mean, she's
Yep,
Nancy Drew on the
she
scene here.
is.
I'm gonna figure this out and find out what's going on. And there's a wing that's always locked.
Hmm.
Um, once she saw Rucastle coming out of it, like super angry, he was all and
Yeah,
walked right past her. She sees that there's a shuttered window there. The other rooms look deserted, but this one room is all closed up. And he tells her, and then he sees her. He She asks him,
yeah. She
um,
actually asks him about it, right?
she's
Like,
like,
oh,
what about that shuttered
that
room?
shutter.
And he tells her that it's a dark room because he's a photographer, but then he says, what an observant young lady we have come upon. Who would have believed it? Um, he's he's knows, uh-oh, this
Yeah.
girl can see what's maybe going on here, and I better be careful. And that's
Yep.
when he warns her. Uh,
Yep.
he says, um, well, it's the she gets a
She reads,
feeling,
right. She reads the suspicion and
yeah,
the annoyance there when he's like ostensibly jesting, but she sees, and they sort of have this, I think, shared moment of knowing that like she is realizing that something's up and he's realizing he has to be on his guard. She talks about her sort of woman's instinct. She feels
yeah.
like something's not right.
I like this a lot that it's,
Yeah.
she's, that it's her duty and that it's a thing that women would feel that perhaps men wouldn't. But then that other really creepy detail of she saw one saw Toller and um
The
uh
servant, yeah.
servant
Or keeps the
carrying a
dog.
large black linen bag through the door, like with his
Yikes.
servants. Like, what's that?
What's
So,
going on? And he's
um,
very drunk all the time.
yes.
He leaves, she waits for the opportunity, right? He leaves the key in the door and she waits. for the Rucastles to be downstairs and the child's not there. And she sneaks in to the forbidden wing.
Yeah. And she
Um,
sees shadows under that door moving around. Someone is in there.
yeah.
And then she behaves like a gothic heroine. She gets really frightened by this. But
Freaks
she's
her the hell
alone.
out. Yeah.
She's alone in this wing. Anything could happen. She doesn't know what's going to go
She
on.
doesn't know who's there. Yeah, exactly.
She really can't prevent anybody from hurting her.
Right.
She runs out, but she runs right into Rucastle, who who but then she knows enough to lie to him.
Hmm.
She
She
doesn't
really
tell him
lays it
she's
on
seen.
thick, right?
Yeah, she doesn't tell him she's seen anything. She
Yeah.
just says, "Oh, I was just frightened. I was so
Like it was
lonely and
so
frightened."
dim. I was so scared. It was
Yeah,
dark and I freaked out, like really leans into
I like
um,
this a lot in
she's
her.
just a
Yeah, that
smart
she
girl.
plays she plays the person who's too frightened to do anything
Yes.
about it, but
Yes. Or to know
really,
anything.
yeah.
She's not supposed to know.
And and then he gives her the warning, if you ever put your foot over that threshold again, I'll throw you to the mastiff. So he's not even gonna mess around with this. He is not gonna
He's
risk getting
terrified.
caught. I'm gonna kill you. Basically, he's told her, you're dead if you go in there again.
And he says it with a smile on his face, which is just
Mhm.
even creepy. Like this isn't done like in anger or in any kind of passion. It's just this overly coaxing, like, oh, you poor thing. Well, if you ever do that again, I'll feed you to the dog.
And usually
Yikes.
when people watch horror movies or read these kind of books or read these things with situations, it's like, well, just go, like, get out. Why are you even here now?
Yeah.
But she addresses this, which I really love that Doris put this in here. She says, I was frightened of the house, of the man, of the woman, of the servants, even of the child. They were all horrible to me. Of course, I might have fled from the house.
Right. Yeah.
My curiosity was almost as strong as my fears.
Yeah.
And then she says, my mind was soon made up. Like she is, I'm going to find out what's going on here,
Yes.
and I'm not going to leave until I do.
Right. But I'm also not going to put myself in danger. I'm going to call for backup.
Because she can send a telegram to Sherlock
She
Holmes for help.
can. Because she set that up for herself, right?
Yep.
Because she said she knew if she was going into a situation that she thought might be dangerous, she wanted somebody at her back. And knowing that she has those reinforcements, yeah, now she's able to investigate.
Holmes
Um,
comes. He says, he recognizes. He says, you seem to have acted all through this matter like a brave and sensible girl, but I need you to do one more thing, and that's she needs to lock Mrs. Toller up in the basement while the
yeah,
Rucastles are out and Toller is drunk, so
yeah,
Holmes can go. They can go in
I
and
think I
solve
see.
the
Yeah.
mystery here. And then
I
he,
do, I do just
uh,
want to sneak in and point out that he does call her. I wouldn't ask this of you if I didn't think you a quite exceptional woman.
yeah.
Just such a compliment from Holmes,
Mhm.
right? For whom there is only the woman, for whom that we always think there's only Irene Adler, and everybody else is just sort of like nothing to Holmes. And he says she is quite exceptional. You
Yeah.
can almost see Watson being like, oh, no wonder, like matchmaker Watson rubbing his hands together, recording this. Of course, his hopes will be dashed, but
And of
um,
course, there's so many. There's four violets in
yeah,
Holmes' stories that are mentioned. So
yeah,
Doyle seems to like the violet name
he
as well.
likes violets. Yes.
Um, they uh, this is the moment where this usually happens at the end of a story.
Hmm.
Instead, it happens right now when there's still
Yeah.
a bit to go. That Holmes explains, what's going on here. He explains all the mystery, and I like it. And it's fascinating here because what's happened is he places it here before the end of the story, and it's okay because the danger is still there,
Yeah.
because Alice still needs saving,
Hmm.
and but it also makes this story, this is a way that this is different from the traditional mystery,
Yes.
in which in the traditional mystery it's always, from Poe's Dupin, it's always about how, it's not how the detective, well, it is in the traditional mystery how the detective solves the case, not
Right.
the solution itself,
Right.
but in how the detective goes about and solves it and uses this. And Holmes, it's all his logical deductions. That's what's
Right. Right.
important to him. You got to know he was so angry at this. Why didn't you just write about how I solved it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, definitely,
Because
definitely.
this is a thriller, this story, more than it is. This is an adventure story.
Right. These are the adventures of Sherlock
Yeah.
Holmes. It's less about
More
the
this
mystery.
one is that more than it is a mystery.
It's creepy. And I love this though, because usually there's this keeping us in the dark and keeping Watson in the
Yeah.
dark. And not only does he bring Watson in on this, he also brings Violet.
Yeah.
He lets Violet know what's going on. He could
Yeah.
just be like, go play your little part, do your thing, and then we'll come take care of it.
Hmm.
But he asks her to do this dangerous thing and like sort of plays fair with her by saying, like, this is what's going on. This is what I've figured out.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's less about like the mystery here. It's less about solving the case. What's going to happen at the climax of this story is the drama and the adventure and the
Yeah.
danger, because there is a tremendous possibility for danger here for many parties, between the dangerous man and the dangerous dog. Um,
Holmes is also aware of the child here and his
yes.
behavior. Um, Holmes Watson is like, what on earth has that got to do with it? The disposition
Right.
of the child. And Holmes is like, you are a medical man, are continually gaining light. As a medical man, are continually gaining light as to the tendencies of a child by the study of the parents.
Yeah.
Don't you see that the converse is equally valid? I have frequently gained my first real insight into the character of parents by studying their children. This child's disposition is abnormally cruel, merely for cruelty's sake, and whether he
Hmm.
derives this from his smiling father, as I should suspect, or from his mother, it bodes evil for the poor girl who is in their power. Um,
Yeah.
that this is, Rucastle is evil because look at this wanton cruelty in the
Yeah.
child. This is where he must get
It's
it from.
remarkable psychological insight in this story. Like this
Yeah.
holds up. A lot of these deductions, like, kind of hold up. The description of the wife, the description of the way the child behaves, even the whole, this is how we still diagnose sociopathic or antisocial behavior in children, is the killing of small animals at a young
Yep.
age and the torturing of small animals. Like this stuff holds up still, and it's like, to me, it just makes it feel creepier because it just feels more realistic and more possible and more true to life.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, this is now we get Holmes to the rescue. Um, they hear the thudding noise from downstairs. That's Mrs. Toller trying to get
yep.
out. Her husband's drunk and passed out in the
And
kitchen.
she's got the keys.
Yeah. They head up, they head into the wing. There's but no sound came from within, and Holmes's face clouded over. I
So
trust that we are not too late. And they break the door down, and the room is
Watson does,
empty.
yeah.
Yeah. The room is empty. Um, and he thinks, there's some villainy here. This is Holmes guessing wrong, is what has happened.
Yes, he does guess wrong here, which
This
is
beauty
amazing.
has guessed Miss Hunter's intention and has carried his victim off.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a skylight and there's a ladder against the eaves. So
Yeah, but we get Violet's deduction, right? That like, but that's impossible because the ladder wasn't there when the Rucastles left. She's still
Violet,
deducing.
yes, is noticing things that
Yeah.
that can't be the case. And then Rucastle comes in. A very fat and burly man with a heavy stick in his hand, not looking like the jolly, fat man of before now.
Nope.
She screams. Holmes springs forward and confronts him, and they're both like, "Where's your daughter? What do you mean, where's my
I
daughter?
love it.
Where's my daughter?" So,
Villain, where's your daughter? Love it. For me to ask you, and then he says that he's going to, right, for me to ask you that, you thieves, spies and thieves, I've caught you. You're in my power. I'll serve you. And then this fear, right? He's gone for the dog.
he's gone for the dog, and then Watson says, "I have my revolver," and Holmes says, "Shut the front door." um, like Holmes is like smart, like, yeah, you can have your revolver all you want, just shut the
Yeah,
front
just
door,
close.
and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
But they hear the scream of agony, the baying of the hound, the scream of agony, and with a horrible worrying sound, which was dreadful to listen to. If people don't know what that word is, that's the shaking of the prey, the worry, the prey there that the animal does. That's what they're hearing, him shaking Rucastle. Um,
Horrible. And Toller
They
drives in.
Toller comes in like, oh, someone has loosed the dog. It has not been fed for 2 days. Quick, or it'll be too late. And they come out and find him. Let's share the picture of that
Oh,
too, that Paget
yeah.
drew. This is Rucastle coming into the room
Oh,
here
yeah, I love this.
with his stick
You
confronting
villain.
Holmes here. Violet's cowering on the wall. Watson's here, maybe reaching
Going
for
for the
his
gun, it looks
revolver in his
like.
pocket.
Yeah.
But Holmes is just standing up to him.
Yeah.
And then there it is.
Yeah. The famished brute, its black muzzle buried in
How
Rucastle's throat
skinny it is.
while he writhes and screams on the open ground. And
And
Watson brushes
Watson
up.
running up, I blew its brains out. So
It's two for Watson, Holmes and
why
Watson.
didn't you just shoot him?
This is the question we all wanted. The
Well,
dog's
and then of
just
course the
hungry.
dog's going to attack him. So
Yeah, yeah, that's
clearly
true.
this for these guys, it's a mercy killing, and that this dog
Yeah,
is beyond saving. And I think that they probably wouldn't have had the power to, rehabilitate this poor dog
right. Poor
this
Carlo.
time. That
Justice for Carlo.
he had to be put down.
These
Uh,
are two dogs that these two have killed now, by the way.
yes.
If we're keeping count at home. The bullpup.
um, yes, they poisoned the dog in
I
Sun.
think it's
No,
Study in Scarlet. I think
Sunny
it's
and
the
Scarlet.
first one. Watson's like, yeah, I'll live with a dog murderer. They said that was a mercy kill too when we found that.
Hmm.
And I think that's why we get
Yeah.
that like really nice attempt to rehab Holmes's relationship with animals when we meet Toby in the Sign of Four.
Yes. Well, Mrs. Toller now comes out and she and she has a confession to make and
Hmm.
oh, you should have told me and I would have helped you. Um but Holmes right away is like, there are several points in which I must confess I am still in the dark. So he needs, and he always he does this in every story,
Yeah,
like, wait, can you tell me, was this like he needs to
yeah.
figure out these little details. He
Did
can't.
you bring your own rope? Yeah, it's exactly
Yes.
that little detail. And
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 she
asks,
says, and she's like
um,
saying, "Hey, don't blame me. I was,
right?
I was Miss Alice's friend too."
Yeah.
Um, she gives the whole story that Rucastle wanted his daughter to sign over her inheritance, uh,
Hmm.
and
More
worried,
shades of the
yeah,
Grimesley Roy lot
and
situation.
pressured her so much that she got brain fever. This is the
Horrible.
first mention of brain fever in a Holmes story. It's going to be mentioned
Oh,
several more times.
yeah, it comes up.
Um, it is a it's a kind of 19th century diagnosis for something that happens when people suffer severe trauma and
Hmm.
then they kind of lose, they become delirious and get
Hmm.
feverish, and it's illness caused by trauma, severe
Hmm.
pressure, a lot of stress and anxiety.
Yes.
And it will come up again in other stories, and Victorians love this idea, the brain fever. That's what happened.
Yeah.
It's almost like a vestige of kind of, the four humors of the body thing.
It
Like
does
there
feel
was
that way.
some weird physical thing going on because something's out of balance.
It's the mind body problem, right? There's
Yeah.
this idea that these things are connected and we're not as modern as I think we are sometimes, that the body can respond to things that are upsetting to the psyche.
This is also, if you've read Dracula, this is what happens to Jonathan Harker after he escapes from Castle Dracula. He has
Yeah,
brain fever and then he's delirious in a hospital for, months.
right. It doesn't just happen to women,
Yeah.
and in the home stories too. It doesn't just happen to
Yeah.
women. We see high power
Yep. It'll happen
businessmen.
again. Yeah. It'll
Yeah,
happen again to men later in these stories. So,
absolutely.
um, they but she got the Alice Rucastle had got brain fever, and then they had to cut all her hair off, and
Hmm.
that's the hair. So and of course her lover, Mr. Fowler, had to be gotten rid of.
Right.
So, and
He's the man in the street.
this is where Holmes says to Mrs. Tyler here that having met you, succeeded by certain arguments, metallic or
Or
other,
otherwise.
that basically Fowler has been giving Mrs. Tyler money. And now, so
And Mr. Taller booze.
yes, and Mr. Tyler Booth. So Holmes is aware that you people aren't really, you weren't really being altruistic over this, is the
Right.
hint here. That, you were just being, you were serving two masters and content to do that. You were
Right,
doing what
exactly.
Rucastle said and getting to live here, and you were also taking money from Fowler to maybe, let her have some kind of contact with Alice. So,
This
but
is like more the class politics that
yeah,
we get in these stories too, right? That we couldn't just go to Mrs. Toller and ask her what was going on. The governess, even though she's not as high status as like the gentleman
yeah,
homes or her employers, like is still higher ranking than the servants of the household. And she's not going to go to them and confide in them. And of course, they're going to show themselves to be morally a little bit, have a little less integrity
yeah.
than Violet. And I just think that's
But it does seem like she has helped.
she has
Um,
helped in her capacity, right?
Now, when Fowler came to save her, this must have been something arranged by the
Mm-hmm.
Towers, that like they knew the Rucastles were out, and they must have let Fowler know, so he'd
Yep.
come with a ladder and save her from the room. So
Yes.
she has aided
Right.
in Alice's
Miss
escape.
Alice's friend.
And we
Yes.
never see her.
No.
She's just gone. Like we never get that revelation, which is a really interesting thing I think that Doyle
Yeah.
does, that we never see Alice. We never get, well, we'll get that in a second. Holmes doesn't rescue her.
No, he doesn't.
Now Holmes says right away, well, you've cleared up everything, thanks. And we're going to take Miss Hunter back to Winchester. It seems that our locus standi now is a rather questionable one,
We gotta
meaning
get out of here.
we better skedaddle because we don't have any legal rights to be here. And some guy was just mauled by a dog, and some girl was,
We shot the dog.
yeah, let's just get out. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to explain this to the police.
It's
Um,
better if we don't. Yeah, exactly. Like, let's get out of town.
and then Watson gives a full account of
Hmm.
everyone's fate, which doesn't usually happen. Do you want to read that?
Yeah, sure. And thus was solved the mystery of the sinister house with the copper beeches in the front of the door. Mr. Rucastle survived, but was always a broken man, kept alive solely through the care of his devoted wife. They still live with their old servants, who probably know so much of Rucastle's past life that he finds it difficult to part from them. Mr. Fowler and Miss Rucastle were married by special license in Southampton the day after their flight, and he is now the holder of a government appointment in the island of Mauritius. As to Miss Violet Hunter, my friend Holmes, rather to my disappointment, manifested no further interest in her once she had ceased to be at the center of one of his problems, and she is now the head of a private school in Walsall, I believe she has met with considerable success.
Interesting. We get the whole wrap up, all the
We
characters,
do, yeah.
as if we're reading a Gothic novel, and we're finding out the ending of everyone here.
Yeah.
Rucastle does survive. He's not killed by the dog, but he's,
No, they let him live and suffer.
yeah. And the old servants stay with him. I mean, Holmes, they know so much,
Hmm.
anyway, that, that it's difficult to part from them, but it's also like they're gonna benefit better because they know his secrets.
Absolutely. The
Um,
blackmail is always a possibility, and who's going to stop them? And
but Alice is gone. We never get to see her.
never meet Alice. No.
And in the end, um, well, first, I love how, I mean, this is such a great story. And this
Yeah.
this this story could easily be a novel.
Oh,
And
definitely, because we could
like
have all of Violet's
all this stuff,
perspective.
and Alice and everything, and her
Yes.
lover, and all this,
Yes.
but a long sensational novel. But Doyle recognizes the right elements to distill into a very succinct story, and picks all the right things, and it works so well, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
Um,
remarkably condensed.
I mean, it's almost like, what if Doyle decided to write Jane Eyre? Like, oh, I think I'll write a Jane Eyre. This is if I wrote Jane Eyre, this
It kind
would
of
be really
is. So
tiny.
yeah. Yeah,
But
it would be really short.
but this is the kind of way that he would put it. And
Hmm.
while Holmes is needed at the end,
Hmm.
um, it's only his presence, because it's only his presence that makes Rucastle go for the dog. Like if Holmes isn't
Right.
there, he's just gonna like grab Violet, like like
Yeah.
she's got no one to save her. Then no
Yeah.
one will ever have heard of Violet Hunter again. Um,
Right.
and so his presence protects her,
Hmm.
but he didn't save Alice. He didn't, so he winds up protecting Violet in the end, but he doesn't solve the case.
No.
He figured it out, but then he got there too late. Um, and that's really odd. Another
Yeah,
odd ending for these.
we think of it as like more of a victory than like the five orange pips, but essentially he's just as powerless with what happens. Like the what happens to the characters who are involved happen separate of him, and this time his client happens to live,
Hmm.
but he hasn't really deduced. He
Well,
isn't
he's
solved any
deduced it.
mystery.
He
He's
did. He
deduced,
figured it
right,
all out.
right, right, but it
And
doesn't sort of have any bearing.
he couldn't save Alice because someone else saved her before
Right,
him.
right,
And he has protected Violet, and
yes,
and everyone lived happily ever after,
right. But
except for
unfortunately,
Rucastle.
Watson, who's been rubbing his hands together, being like, you think she's good at deducing stuff?
Yeah.
You think she's a nice girl? Is disappointed to find out that Holmes like is like, okay, that's cool. That was just a case. I
To
don't
my
know.
disappointment, he
Yeah,
manifested no further interest in no
I
further.
love that.
Yeah. So I was hoping finally I could get out of these quarters because Holmes would
No,
leave with her, and I could or I could keep Baker Street, and Holmes would go off.
it's like, oh, my friend is finally showing an interest in women. He is definitely not showing an interest in women. Like, good luck. But Violet Hunter does very well for herself in the end, right?
He
She gets
does.
comes
He
ahead
gets
of a
the head of a
school.
school. Yeah.
Good for her.
This is also the end of the kind of first series of Sherlock Holmes adventures. There's
Hmm.
12 of them. And then while we'll return in a week for our next episode, Silver Blaze,
Hmm.
Doyle's first readers had to wait 6 months for the next Sherlock story. So he had written these
Terrible.
12, and then there were 6 months in between, and then he started again. So
Our listeners are so lucky.
we're already like we meet once, we do this once a week, and other people are, his original readers were waiting once a month for these.
Yeah.
But this will then later be published, all the 12 stories together, and I'll talk about that on another show when they're all the first issue comes out. Well, Sherlockians, thank you for joining us for episode 16 of Sherlock Mondays. Mary, I am happy that I had you, my Copper Beach companion, to join me for this one. Thank you
It
so
was
much.
great. Great that it worked out this way, Ed.
Right?
Thanks for
Well, it
having
worked
me.
out because you were like, I'm doing Copper Beach. I'm like,
I'm very persuasive.
yes, you are. All the co-hosts got to choose their stories. So people notice, like,
Yeah.
usually on these shows, I just do a regular rotation, but these, everybody was like, no, I need this story. I need this story. I
Right.
need this story. So
Monica needs to have
yes,
speckled band like
people were
100%. Yeah, yeah.
scattered around.
Yeah.
So, but that works very well. You will return for episode 19,
Yeah.
The Adventure of the Yellow Face, which will be
Great case.
really interesting to talk
Such
about.
an interesting case. Speaking of gothic vibes.
On our next show, episode 17, we'll gamble on horse races. We will solve a murder and meet a curious dog. Everyone knows that one. So that's the Silver Blaze, and Monica Schmidt will be here as co-host. Thanks to our chat, Mrs. Hudson Brianna, for managing the live chat links. Thank you to the sponsor of Sherlock Mondays, Lisa Washington. We couldn't do these shows without the support of our generous patrons. You can support the Rosenbach through donation. Your support helps us create more programs like this and also care for our collections. You could also become a member. Membership gives you early access and discounts to programs and courses. You can find out about all this stuff at our website, rosenbach.org. And again, let me remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to like these videos. Hopefully, you'll like these videos. And if you're listening to the podcast, to leave us a review. Thank you, Mary. You have a great one.
Thanks, Ed. You too.
I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library, where the game is a book. Thanks, everyone. Good night.